You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Hello, East Tennessee. Welcome to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. This is News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I want to welcome you to 2025. I'm awfully excited about the new year, new opportunities, new opportunities to engage with family, to engage with clients, to engage with the community, and to just create more living so you can live the best years of your life. You know, retirement really should be the greatest period of your life because it provides the kind of freedom and financial independence that we want. The problem is that freedom and financial independence rely very, very much on having our ducks in a row. So on today's show, I want to talk about preparing for 2025, and I've got 9 key financial moves that you can make to secure your financial future. I think these are things you can work on in the next 30 to 60 days as we head into 2025. And these are just my 9 building blocks, if you will, to a comprehensive plan to secure your future. So we're going to dive right in. Number 1, I'm going to ask a question before I give you the tip. And the question I want to ask is, do you know how much money you're spending? Because in retirement, to be able to have the income that we need to have the lifestyle we want, you know, you're no longer going to have earned income. And you're going to have to track your budget a little bit more closely. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to have every single category to the dollar. But I think you do, tip number 1, determine your spending needs and desires. Now, this can be, what I have found, it can be a little bit daunting to take on, because we think I've got to have a budget for every little thing that I do. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I'm going to give you a couple of quick and easy ways to help you get your arms around how much you're actually spending. So one of the things that I can recommend that is a quick and dirty way to do that is, you know, how often are you paid and what is the net amount that hits your bank account? What your salary is meaningless in this equation. It's how much is actually hitting your bank account, because you're having deductions coming out. You've got payroll tax. You will not have payroll tax when you retire. But, you know, you got your health insurance coming out. You've got 401k contributions, whatever. How much is hitting your bank account? How many times a year? Is it 12 times? Is it 24 times? Is it 26 times? And then figure out, okay, how much money is hitting my bank account over the course of the whole year. And if you're a married, you know, if you're a household, look at both people if you're both working. And then what happens throughout the year to your cash? You know, where that money's going. Is it growing? Is it getting smaller? What's actually happening with those balances in your bank account? And you probably have a pretty good idea without even looking at your bank account balances. Is the bank account pretty much staying about the same? Is it getting larger? Or is it getting smaller? And you can very quickly start to get an idea of how much money you spend. But you have to know that in order to start building a retirement income plan specifically. And then everything is kind of evolves around that income plan. So that's just kind of a quick and dirty way you can get your arms around it. Now, another option would be, you know, just track your spending the next 30 to 60 days. Just track it. You know, every week sit down, look at where the money's going. Don't put it into too many categories. Try to consolidate categories and have good 8, maybe 10 categories. And, you know, you'll see kind of what you're spending. But honestly, to me, the easiest way is to look how much is hitting your bank account from your paycheck and then what's happening throughout the year. You'll really be able to get a good feel for how much money you're actually spending. Because if you don't know how much you're spending, it's going to be really difficult to develop a retirement plan that can provide the income that you need. And, we don't retire on assets, we retire on income. So you have to know how to structure your life savings to provide enough income that you not only can meet your basic needs, but also live the way you want to live. What are your discretionary needs? And, as a rule of thumb, you will just gradually slow down your spending in retirement. And, initially that slow decrease will be you're slightly slowing down your discretionary spending. Now then later in life, your medical spending needs will go up. But for now, you've got to get your arms around how much money you're spending. Now then, number 2, tackle your debt. If you have debt, more than likely, it needs to be addressed before you retire. The one potential exception is your mortgage, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute. But before we get to the mortgage, you certainly do not need to have consumer debt, credit card debt, when you retire. Now, if you can be using your credit card, but it needs to be paid off in full every month. So number 1, you've got to have a plan to retire your consumer credit card debt. Now, as far as vehicles, I'm okay if you have a vehicle and you've got basically free money financing. Now, what is free money? I would say anything less than 2% is kind of free money. But, if it's higher than that, certainly if it's based on today's interest rates, it will be a good bit higher than that. It's just not worth paying 5 or 6% when you get a new car. So I think if you're paying those kind of rates, you need to have a plan to pay off your car debt as well. And then buying new cars in retirement, not necessarily brand new, but new to you, should just be accounted for in your budget. You build up a pot of money, and then you can pay cash for a car. Or if you're able to finance something at a 0 or a 1 or a 2%, 1.9% rate, I think that's okay too. So either build it up and then pay for it, or finance it at basically free money. But you shouldn't be borrowing at 5 or 6 or 7% interest to pay, to get a car. As a rule in retirement. I mean, there's always exceptions to this, depending on how much money you have and how it's invested and how you want to handle that. But I would say as a rule, you don't want to have debt on things that go down in value, which is going to be things you purchase on a credit card, and it's going to be your cars. Now, what about your mortgage? Because I get asked this question all the time. Jim, should I pay off my mortgage? And I'm not one of these that believe necessarily that everybody in retirement should be mortgage free. I will, however, tell you that as a rule of thumb, it makes income a lot easier if you do not have a mortgage payment. If you look at the cash flow that you need to generate to pay your mortgage payment every month, and remember, you've got to figure after income taxes, right? I mean, if you're paying a mortgage that's $1,500 a month, that's $18,000 a year, but you may need to be pulling out $22,000, $23,000 a year because of the tax burden. So in that case, you're $1,800, $1,900 a month out of your cash flow that goes straight to the mortgage. So I am a big believer in having the mortgage paid for as a rule once you retire. Now, that's not hard and fast. If you've got a really low interest rate, you financed at 2.5% or 3 or 3.5%, and you've got secure investments and a good investment and income plan, and you can support the mortgage payment, then I think it's fine to have a mortgage payment. I will tell you, as a general rule of thumb, our clients that have no mortgage payment, as a rule, everything's just more comfortable in terms of providing for their needs. When we go back to my first tip of determining your spending needs, how much are you spending? And getting your arms around that. It just, as a rule, a lot easier to plan for all of this when you do not have a mortgage. So those are good rules of thumb. Nothing is cast in concrete, except for I do think you need to have your credit card debt, consumer debt paid for when you retire. And ideally, you wouldn't have car loans at 5, 6, 7% per year. But overall, debt should really not be a regular part of your life once you are retired, other than, charging things and then paying them off every month. Now, we're going to get to our first break. When we come back, among other things, we're going to talk about building a sustainable retirement income strategy. So stay with us. You're listening to More Living with Jim Brogan right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm your host, Jim Brogan, and I don't know about you, but I'm awfully excited about 2025 and the new things to come. Today, I'm outlining 9 key financial moves that you can make to secure your financial future in 2025. And these are just basic steps that I think all 9 of these things need to be addressed in order for you to be successful and secure your future. In the first segment, I talked about the first 2 tips. One is you got to know how much you're spending. So determining what your spending needs and desires are to create so you know what kind of monthly income you need. And then number 2, tackle your debt. You just don't want to have revolving consumer debt and really ideally automobile debt when you're in retirement. Number 3, maximize your retirement contributions. There's no question in my mind that the best way to accumulate wealth is in retirement plans, whether that's a 401k or a 403b, whether that's traditional or a Roth 401k or a Roth 403b or an IRA or a Roth IRA. Our Internal Revenue Code, which ultimately was written by Congress, it's written to encourage us and give us tax incentives to fund our retirement. And, of course, there's a fundamental difference between a traditional 401k or IRA and a Roth. With traditional, you're getting an immediate tax savings when you put your money in retirement because it's deducted from your taxable income. And in 2025, if you're 50 or older this year, you can put up to $31,000 out of your paycheck into your 401k. And if it's on the traditional side, that full $31,000 is not taxed. So putting that $31,000 in there might save you $7,000 or $8,000 in income taxes. So it doesn't actually cost you $31,000; it might cost you $24,000. And then it grows tax deferred. Now then, of course, with traditional, you have to then pay the tax when you take the money out. Now, a Roth is the opposite. You get no tax benefit going in. So if you put in $31,000, it's going to affect you $31,000 instead of $24,000 because you're not saving those $7,000 of income taxes. Then it also grows tax deferred, and then as long as it's used qualified distributions in retirement, it's tax free. One of the biggest components to all of this is the fact that this money grows tax deferred. And in other words, you don't get a 1099 every year on interest, dividends, capital gains, investment income. Your IRA or your 401k, it's a tax shelter. So think of it as an umbrella. And anything that's under that umbrella is sheltered from income tax. The only time you have to pay income tax is if you pull it out. You take it out from underneath the umbrella, underneath the tax shelter. Now, of course, a Roth, tax-free. Now, as a general rule of thumb, you need to be 59 and a half before you start taking money out of these accounts. All right? There are ways to get money out before you're 59 and a half, but you have to jump through a whole lot of hoops, and we're not going to get into those details today. And I'm not going to get into Roth versus traditional too much today because I want to get these 9 tips. But there's no question in my mind that whether it's traditional or Roth, it's the best way to accumulate wealth. You just now have these restrictions where you don't have unfettered access to that money before you're 59 and a half. And so that's got to be, what if you're 51 and you might need money when you're 55 or that kind of thing. You've got to have other elements to your financial plan. But maximizing your retirement contributions, the fact that you can do $31,000 in 2025 in a company plan if you're 50 or older this year. And if you're not 51 or older, you can do $23,500. And in an IRA, you can do $8,000 if you're over 50. So just great ways to accumulate wealth and to build up enough nest egg that you can then convert it into sustainable income in retirement. And that leads me to tip number 4, build a sustainable retirement income strategy. Now there's several elements to this. I mentioned earlier in the first segment, we don't retire on assets, we retire on income. We've got to be able to produce sustainable retirement income. Now, what does that really mean? I think it means that you have stability of income, and then it has to be sustainable for the rest of your life. In other words, you don't want to run out of money before you run out of life, right? We don't want to go broke. And part of that is planning for inflation. So when we talk about sustainable retirement income, we have to think about cost of living. I think a good rule of thumb, if you assume a 3% inflation rate, you'll need your income to go up about 2% per year in retirement. All the data supports, and what I see with my own clients is you don't need to fully meet up with the cost of living because, as I said in that first segment, you will gradually slow down your spending. So inflation minus 1% is a good rule of thumb. So if inflation's 3%, you need your income to go up about a 2% per year clip. But sustainable income needs you don't run out. And inflation over the long haul is as big a risk as you face in retirement if you retire in your 60s. People are living longer and longer lives today, and inflation is just a tremendous risk that you face. You have to be worried about what things cost, not only when you're 75, but when you're 85 and maybe when you're 91 or 92. Because, if you're 65 today and you're a married couple, the likelihood is one of you there's a pretty decent likelihood, greater than 50-50, that one of you will live into your 90s. So you won't be spending as much money from a discretionary point of view, but you'll have more medical needs. So inflation is really the silent killer of retirement income. I call it the cholesterol of retirement because it just kind of sneaks up on you. You wake up one day in 10, 12 years and you're like, where's my income going? Now, the best way to fight inflation over the long haul is to invest in the stock market and to have a diversified, balanced portfolio of securities. The problem is the stock market in the short term is completely unpredictable, and it always has the potential to be very volatile and choppy. So this creates a little bit of a quandary because we have no stability and certainty with stock market investing, and we need stability and certainty of income in retirement when we're not earning money. That means our life savings is going to have to produce that income. But then at the same point, we need to grow our income over time and fight inflation, which is where the stock market comes in. So I think that the best way to balance this and create sustainable income in retirement is to think of your money as 2 different kinds of money. I like to talk about buckets. If you've listened to this show over the years, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You've got your safe money bucket and you've got your risk money bucket. Now let's define the buckets. The safe money bucket ideally has guaranteed principal. And then you've got to look at who's backing the guarantee. If it's not contractually guaranteed, it needs to be very stable. So in other words, when we have a major market correction or a bear market, you're not worried about your safe money. And then the risk money has no type of short-term protection. Most people need a good mix of this when they get close to retirement or they're retired, because safe money provides stability and certainty when there's a lot of uncertainty. The problem with safe money is it does not beat inflation as a rule. The best way to beat inflation is the risk money, but the risk money exposes you to short-term uncertainty. You need both of them. The safe money provides you with dependable short-term income. So I'm a big proponent of living on safe money in those first 4, 5, 6 years of retirement and not living on risk investments. What you don't want to be doing is when the stock market is substantially down, when your investments are substantially down, you don't want to be selling off shares of investment in order to spend it as your income, because then you're going to compound your loss and that money can never come back because you've spent it. You know, it's okay to sell something when it's down and reinvest it, but you never want to sell it when it's down and then spend it. And if you're depending on risk assets for short-term income, that's exactly what you're going to have to do in a sharp market downturn. Now, I don't want you to get one thing wrong. If you have stocks that pay dividends, by all means, I think you can draw on those dividends because you're not selling shares of the stock. You're just letting it ride, and you're looking at the longer-term picture of the value of the share price of the stock. So you could incorporate the dividends from risk investments as part of your income plan. You just don't want to see the markets go sharply down and you've got to realize and sell an investment loss and then that money gets spent. Because if that happens in the first 5 to 10 years of retirement and you have substantial losses and you're spending that money while it's down, it could be an irrevocable mistake. It could be catastrophic if you eat into your money too fast early on. So we can live on that safe money with the certainty and the guarantees to get us through at least 5, 6, 7 years, because markets are unpredictable. They're going to go up, they're going to go down. And when they do go sharply down, you have a plan to not have to touch that money. So it's going to be your leave-on money. Let's call it your leave-on money. Your safe money is your live-on money. Your risk money is your leave-on money. You're going to leave it to grow through the inevitable ups and downs, as long as you don't lose too much, which I'll talk about a little bit later with one of our other tips on measuring risk. But the income plan, in my view, is the most overlooked area in retirement planning today. How do you structure your investments to draw dependable income that doesn't depend on the stock market in the short term, but isn't bogged down with mediocre investment results in the long term? Because you've got to beat inflation, and that risk investment, if it's diversified and balanced, is the best way to do that. So build a sustainable retirement income strategy. Now, the second part of that is Social Security election, right? And Social Security election, very, very important. Biggest thing I'll tell you is there's no one-size-fits-all approach. What's good for your neighbor or your brother or your coworker may be the worst thing you could do. As a rule of thumb, I'm a big fan of the higher income spouse delaying the benefit somewhat, at least to full retirement age, if not even age 70, if you can afford to. Because people are living longer lives than they were 40 years ago when the tables that determine your income were produced. People are living a lot longer lives now. So we don't want to short circuit ourselves by making a poor Social Security strategy. We also, though, need to consider things like, what's your spousal benefit if you're married? What's a widower benefit if you're married? What will that look like in the future, and how does that affect your Social Security strategy? All of these things are terribly important when you construct your financial plan and for sustainable income. So segment your money. You've got to have some short-term certainty with long-term growth with your investment mix. That's the safe bucket and the risk bucket. And then you've got to have a good Social Security strategy. And then I'll go back to tip number 1. You got to know how much you're spending. What's your spending need? And can your retirement plan handle that? So we've been through 4 of my 9 tips. When we come back from our bottom of the hour break, we're going to go into my next 2 tips about, and the most central would be mitigating risk. How long has it been since you actually measured the risk in your investment portfolio? Stay tuned. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. We're with you every Saturday, News Talk 98.7 WOKI. We're with you 9 to 10 a.m. and again 3 to 4 p.m. You can also catch all of our podcasts. Go to your Apple Podcast or Spotify. We're there. You can also go to my website at broganfinancial.com and listen to our podcasts right there on the website. I'm excited about 2025. I'm excited about new opportunities. I'm excited about relationships with people we love. I'm excited about serving the community. I'm excited about the things that we can do to help you have a greater retirement. And today I'm talking about preparing for 2025, and I'm talking about 9 key financial moves you can make to secure your future. Do this in the next 30 to 60 days. So tip number 5, I'm going to ask you another question. How long has it been since you measured the risk in your portfolio? And my tip is mitigating that risk. Yeah, I think it's very important to understand in investing, and I'm going to call it today the volatility tax. You've heard me talk about the cruel math of losses, but let's look at it as a volatility tax. When we look at investing, what we don't like is the real big downturn. It can be devastating. And, you know, when we look at markets since 1900, we have a bear market about every 8 years. And that means the stock market goes down more than 20%. And the average is closer to 40%. When you get up over a 30, 35, 40% loss, there's a tremendous cost for that type of volatility. So let's use an example. Let's say you have $100,000 and you lose 50%. You now have $50,000. Now, if I have $50,000 and I make 50%, I'm at $75,000. Are you with me? So I started at 100, I lost 50%, and then I made 50%, but now I'm at $75,000. I've lost 25%. Think of that 25% as a volatility tax, because that's what it is. I mentioned the average bear market is 40%, so if I have 100,000 and I lose 40%, I'm at 60. If I didn't make 40%, I'm at 84. So I started with 100, lost 40%, made 40%, I'm at 84. That's a 16% volatility tax over a period of those 2 years. Now, if I lose 20% and I go from 100,000 to 80,000, and then I make 20%, then I'm now at 96,000. I realize I'm throwing out a lot of numbers, but that volatility tax is only 4%. So when you get the big, deep downturns, there becomes this volatility tax that is just devastating to financial planning and to retirement planning. And so it's very important when we have the big downturns that you don't lose what the market loses. Now, it's different if you're 30 years old, 35 years old. You've got 30 years before you're going to need to draw income. But if you're in retirement, you need current income now. And yeah, you're going to position some safe money to provide for some of that current income. But then at some point in 6, 7, 8 years, you're going to need to draw from your risk investments. And so that volatility tax can become very, very problematic. So how do you decrease that volatility tax? Like we have volatile markets that are sharply down. When they happen, how do you keep from losing so much? I'm not as worried about the 12 or 15% market downturn. I'm worried about the 30 to 40 to 45%. And you do it with a greater level of diversification. You do it by owning more things. When we look at the word diversification, what it really means is when one thing zigs, another thing zags. So if one thing like stocks is way down, hopefully they're not all way down. And the idea is no matter what happens in the market, you've got If you own 9 or 10 or 11 things, you've got a few things that are doing pretty well or holding their own. Okay, now the flip side is that means when the market booms, you're going to have a few things that are not going to do as well. So it's about the trade-offs between risk and reward, and it's a constant. That's what investing is. And that's based on things like what's your risk tolerance, how much are you comfortable losing in a down market, and how much can you afford to lose in a down market, and building a portfolio around that. But to do that, we have to be able to measure risk. And the great thing is we have tools today in our industry where we can measure risk and have a very good idea for future risk. Not am I going to make money or lose money and how much, but if the market does X, what would I expect my portfolio to do? And it's not exact. We know there's no assurances or guarantees with risk investments, but we can have a pretty good idea. And before I leave managing volatility, I do want to add one of the pieces of diversification that we're big believers in is owning volatility. What does that mean? It means when we have a sharp downturn, you've got some stuff in your portfolio that can make money from that. And when we own volatility, we can have convexity. And what does that mean? Think about it this way. If you look at my insurance premium on my home, and I'm paying an annual premium, several $1,000s a year, I'm sure you are too. But what if I have a claim and I have hail damage and my roof needs to be fixed and I got leaking and I've got some water damage? It may cost the insurance company $80,000 or $100,000 in money. So I'm getting a powerful, I'm getting that exponential return on my insurance premium if I need it. That's convexity. I pay a little bit, and when I own volatility like that, I can own a little bit of it, and when markets are sharply down, they pay off in a significant way. So you just got to, bottom line, own a lot of different things. One thing zigs, another zags, and be sure you own volatility in your portfolio. Tip number 6, review your health and long-term care plans. Health care, we all know, is one of the biggest costs in retirement. And I know we see studies that say, if you're 65 years old, you're probably going to spend $330,000, $340,000 in your retirement on health care, both in premiums and utilization. But, we don't pay that all at once. You pay that over time. So it's just got to be built into your budget. What is your Medicare premium? What type of a Medicare supplement do you pick? And then, if you pay for a rich supplement, you've got a higher fixed cost, but your utilization costs, which are variable, are going to be minimal. If you pay a lower premium for a cheaper Medicare supplement plan, you're going to have a lower fixed cost, but your variable costs can be higher. But it just needs to be built into your financial plan, your income plan. That goes back to that income sustainability. So you got to build in a budget for health care. And then for long-term care, if you're 65 today, you've got about a 70% likelihood you're going to need long-term care, meaning you need help. You cannot live independently for more than 90 days. Sometimes it might be rehabilitation for 4 to 6 months. More often than not, it's permanent custodial care that you need help living. It is a big cost. The average nursing home now in East Tennessee is up to about $100,000 a year or a little bit higher. Long-term care facilities are getting more expensive. I think before you can leverage money for long-term care with insurance, you first need to make sure you can have sustainable income to meet your basic needs. Then if you've got that, does it make sense to set aside a small amount of money that is no longer going to be an income-producing asset for you because it's going to fund long-term care, but then it can pay off in a much, much larger amount, kind of like that convexity that I just talked about with owning volatility in a portfolio. So these are all the kinds of things we need to be considering with health care and long-term care. It's not rocket science, and some of you may not need long-term care, and you may not need to leverage that. Most people I meet with, if they can afford to, they'd like to set aside a small amount of money to then be leveraged into a much larger amount of money if they need it. And with the plans that are available today, you can do that. and still get your money back if you don't need the long-term care. Meaning you wouldn't necessarily get it back, but your kids may get it back. So it's still an asset in your estate. You're just not going to use it to draw income. And it's going to be for leverage for long-term care. Tip number 7, create your tax strategy. Income taxes are, along with health care, our biggest expenses in retirement for most of us. How can you reduce income tax in retirement? Now, you've heard me say all the time that you have more control of taxes typically in your retirement than you have at any other time in your life, because you decide where to draw your investment income from and how that money is taxed. You know, if you take money out of an IRA or a 401k, it's taxed as ordinary income. If you sell a mutual fund, some of it is tax cost basis, you owe no tax on it. And some of it is taxed as a capital gain, either short or long term. Long-term gains are far preferential tax treatment. If you go down to the bank and you pull out $200 from the bank, or $2,000, or $5,000, that doesn't generate a taxable event. That does not show up on your tax return. You don't get a 1099 for making that $2,000 withdrawal from the bank. So understanding the decisions you make in retirement and how that affects your tax return, how can you be investing money now to take advantage of those taxes when you are retired? You know, if you have capital investments like stocks and mutual funds inside your IRA or 401k, they don't get capital gains treatment. They're taxed as ordinary income. So to get that advantage treatment, you've got to have non-IRA investments that are invested in capital growth assets like mutual funds and stocks and ETFs. So it's important to understand your asset location from a tax perspective. How am I being taxed on this investment versus that investment? Creating a tax strategy, I think, with the federal debt that we have now, with the huge deficit spending we're seeing, and the challenges there, we're starting to see that become a little bit bigger part of the mainstream press. And in Washington, I think creating a long-term tax strategy to keep more money in your pocket is a huge key to a successful financial plan. When we come back, we're going to have my final 2 tips on creating a secure financial future in 2025. Stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Thanks for tuning in this week to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan. I hope you're off to a very blessed, happy new year here in 2025. I'm so excited about the prospects of a great, great year. Today I'm talking about securing your financial future, and I'm talking about 9 key financial moves you can make in the next 60 days to secure that financial future. My tip number 8 is to review and update your estate plan. Now you may say, well, that's really for when I'm gone, Jim. Well, no, it's not. It's also about taking care of you while you're alive. When you think about your estate plan, the powers of attorney documents they take care of you while you're alive, and that's part of your estate plan. There are 2 powers of attorney. There's a medical power of attorney. That's for someone to make your medical decisions when you cannot. And then there's a financial power of attorney, someone to pay your bills and administer your affairs when you cannot. They're both very, very important. And they take care of you while you're alive. It might be a brief period of time you can't take care of yourself. It could be a permanent thing. But either way, you need those powers of attorney. Now, I would also say the peace of mind of how our estate is going to be handled at our death is still a huge part of securing our financial future, knowing that we're not going to leave a mess. There's no quicker way for family members to get into fights and to have separation than money. Money causes a lot of fights. And the more streamlined you can have your estate and the simpler you can have things set up, then the less chance there's going to be hardship or disagreements among your family members or among your heirs. So I think it's critically important to have an estate plan. And so the basic components, everybody needs to have a will. Even if you have a living trust, you still need a will in case there's something out there that you either didn't put into the trust or you did not name the trust as beneficiary. You still need a will. Everybody does. I mentioned your powers of attorney documents. And then I think everybody needs to have a living will. That's an advanced medical directive. If you're incapacitated and you have no hope for recovery, how do you want to pass on? Now, I see mistakes all the time. The most common mistake that I see with legal documents is not updating them enough. And a good rule of thumb to me is about every 5 years you need to be looking at your legal documents, reading through them. Is there a change that you need to make? In addition to that, I'd say anytime you have a qualifying life event in your family, you need to review your will and your other legal documents. Now, what is a qualifying life event? That would be a marriage or a divorce, a birth or a death somewhere in your family tree. You need to review that will again and your legal documents. Now, I know attorneys that would say every 2 or 3 years you need to review it, and to be clear, I'm not an attorney. I think every 5 years is fine. I do think you probably need to be reaching out to your attorney at least every 5 years and just inquiring, has anything changed in the law that you might need to update your legal documents? In the last 5 years, we have had 2 changes to the rules for how retirement accounts are left to our family and the rules for how they have to be taken out. And if you haven't updated your estate plan in the last 5 years, you very well may need new language because of the new rules for retirement accounts. That's the Secure Act and the Secure Act 2.0. So, how would you know about that? And you need to ask your attorney. Attorneys, as a rule, they don't reach out to you and let you know about these things because they work for you when you ask them to work for you. And they work on an hourly rate. So we probably need to be reaching out to them periodically. And then finally, my tip number 9 to secure your financial future in 2025, get expert financial guidance. If you're a do-it-yourselfer, that's okay. But listen to smart people and don't listen to extreme people that say things like, the market's going to crash half of its value in the next 60 days. How can somebody know that? They're probably selling something. Likewise, they may say, hey, we've got this great method for picking stocks. You can make 20% a year. I just be careful with extremes. Listen to smart people. Learn about financial planning in retirement. Now, obviously, getting expert financial guidance, you could hire someone. That is what we do at Brogan Financial. There are other advisors throughout the country that also do comprehensive retirement planning for their clients. But to me, it needs to be a fiduciary, meaning they're regulated where they have to act solely in your best interest at all times. And they're comprehensive. They can talk to you about tax mitigation strategies. They can talk to you about your estate planning documents and make sure that they coordinate with your beneficiary designations and there aren't any hidden errors in there that could cause a problem for your kids. They can help you with your Social Security election. They can help you with all of these things. Income planning. But get expert guidance, whether it's a comprehensive planner who's a fiduciary or listening to the right people if you're a big do-it-yourselfer. Today we've discussed your wealth because greater wealth provides for more living so you can live the best years of your life your way. I want to thank Jill for helping produce the show. I want to thank Jennifer for engineering the show. I hope you have a very blessed weekend and are off to a great 2025. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.